And we're going to break down all of the SEC games. Before we get to that, we kind of wanted to talk about the Heisman running because, start out the year, there were a lot of SEC quarterbacks. There's been some losses. Carson Beck was pretty high up on the list initially for the Heisman watch. Same with Jackson Dart. Both took a loss last week. And now, looking at the odds, pulled from FanDuel, Jalen Milroe is now the favorite at plus 220 after a big win at Georgia. So it was a pretty deserving, I think, jump to that number one spot, being the quarterback on a number one team, right?
Yeah, I think it's very deserving. I mean, you look at what Jalen Milroe was able to do last week on the ground, a couple touchdowns in the air, I think in one touchdown on the ground. And ultimately that's been the biggest test out of all of the players that are in contention for the Heisman this season. Like that was his Heisman moment. And so it's not a surprise he's in that spot. Are there any players that you look at this list and say who right now would provide the biggest competition to him when it comes to, first place in the Heisman race?
Yeah. And it's tough because it's often a quarterback award. Alabama's had some guys to break that, Derrick Henry, Devontae Smith. It's a quarterback themed award, and right behind Jalen Milroe in those odds right now in the season is Cam Ward, the only guy, on this list that passes Milroe in touchdowns on the season. He has played one more game. He scored 20 touchdowns. They are undefeated. They're the front runner in the ACC.
Yeah.
With the schedule that they have ahead, they're likely going to make the playoffs with a bye, barring anything crazy happen. Milroe right now, more touchdowns per game as an average. But, in looking at what's ahead for these two teams, I think Cam Ward poses the biggest threat. But unless Alabama loses a game or you see a bad game from Milroe, I don't think that Cam Ward at this point does anything to jump him, just because of the level of competition that Milroe's played and will play, with Tennessee down the road and LSU. Right now, Miami's going to play Louisville, who might not be ranked at the time that they play.
Right. And I think that the committee in terms of the Heisman voters has shown in the past that for the most part, they're going to value competition. The year that Joe Burrow won it, obviously he had the best stats from a passing perspective. But he was undefeated and they had played the best competition last year. I think, if Oregon and Washington were able to kind of go into, if Michael Penix probably had a little bit better stats, he's taken that over Jay Daniels. So I think we're right now, blink of an eye right now. You look at just this moment right now, take a photography of this moment. Jalen Milroe's team's undefeated. He has, he's top 2 in stats across the board for the most part. So that plays to his advantage for Cam. The schedule might not be favorable, but he has Miami on his chest. So that helps from a brand awareness recognition perspective. I would say he would have to win the ACC championship to probably help cement that case to leapfrog over. If he has more traditional passer moments, which I think that his game lends to, the committee typically likes that as well. When it comes to winning those type of awards as more of a pocket passer in some regards compared to Jalen Milroe.
Yeah. And you're going to see the turnover stat. I'm not just trying to sit here and say why Milroe should win it, but you're going to see turnover stats in there. And right now, no interceptions for Jalen Milroe on the year. He's playing a pretty clean game. He had, some put the ball on the ground early in the year. It's a quarterback award, but I don't think either of these two guys are the best player in the country right now. Like, it's not a hot take. Everyone knows, like, Travis Hunter is probably the best college football player in the country. He does it on both sides of the ball. No one is doing it like him, but he's playing two positions that aren't the Heisman winning positions per se, aside from a couple guys. He's playing wide receiver, he's playing cornerback. He's got pretty good stats on both sides of the ball. He's their best player at that position on both sides, aside from maybe Jimmy Horn. But
and you're seeing it across the board, right? I love, like, I focus on the moments, like that Baylor game. You're in overtime. You put yourself in a position to punch the ball with your head. If anyone's played football that listens to this, they know that coach always says, put your helmet on the ball. Like, to be able to have those type of plays while playing both sides, playing over 100 snaps a game, and scoring on the offense is a unique wrinkle for Travis's game that will leapfrog him to be in New York. Is it going to be enough to put him at 2 or 1? We'll see. If he keeps doing this all season, I think Colorado would just need maybe 7-8 wins to help cement that. I don't know if he needs the Big 12 championship and the playoff appearance to garner that award, given that he's playing both sides and making an impact on both fronts. I mean, he's got 6 touchdowns in the year receiving, and he's got 2 interceptions on the year already, a forced fumble, and last year 3 interceptions the whole season. So, I mean, he's right now at this pace, he's pacing really well to have a historic, legendary season.
Yeah, and going into the year, the expectations for Colorado were low. Like, everyone was like, okay, if you're a Colorado fan, the expectations are high, but everybody else is like, they're not going to be able to do it. They're 2-0 in their conference right now. They play K-State, they play Utah. He's going to have every chance to show that he should be there in New York. If they win those games or one of those games, it puts them in a serious conversation. And I think it's more about where they finish maybe in this conference than the wins on the year, because they're doing well right now. And he's been a critical part of that. Like you mentioned, winning the game there against Baylor in that game winning play. So I think he could be in New York definitely deserves to be.
I think he definitely deserves to be. And the 2 teams that we've kind of talked about in this 3-team tangle with Miami and with Alabama and Colorado makes me think of 2 points where Colorado and Alabama potentially might have 2 guys who could vie for this race. For Colorado, Shedeur Sanders looked pretty impressive. But for Alabama, I've been seeing a lot of stats float around about Ryan Williams. And right now he's trending with more yards in the season at this point compared to Devontae Smith, who won the Heisman, was the last receiver to win the Heisman. It is a very tough thing to do. So, what are your thoughts on Ryan Williams potentially entering this discussion as the season continues to play out?
I think that's really interesting. It definitely is. We saw Mac Jones there at the ceremony with Devontae, and there's the opportunity for that. Definitely. I think there's a lot of guys who maybe deserve the trip to New York in a limited spot than Ryan Williams. With what Milroe's been able to do on the ground and the way that the offense is playing from a using Milroe's leg situation, his stats, I think, will always outpace Ryan Williams.
Yep.
But he's got a lot of years left at Alabama. He's 17, but he's got to be there for a couple more years. And they're backfilling the quarterback position, and they have guys who can throw the ball to him. So maybe not this year, but in future years, I could definitely see him there.
Definitely. And it's a question I pose, just like looking at some of the stats, and I think people just get excited when they see these type of performances. But looking at the stats that are provided here by FanDuel, other guys on the list that are notable: Nico from Tennessee, Dylan Gabriel as well from Oregon could be a dark horse potential player for this award. Nico is the most intriguing one. First year starter. A lot of hype. He only has 2 interceptions in the year, and he has his team at the highest position that Tennessee's been ranked, probably since Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, no, they're playing solid. He had the 2 fumbles against Oklahoma, so his defense helped erase any problems that those could have caused. The one near the goal line that Oklahoma could have scored on. Not to discredit him, but he's going to have opportunities to bump his name up the list. A couple weeks here, Tennessee's going to play Alabama. If he outperforms Milroe in that game, who knows what could happen for him. Dylan Gabriel is going to have an opportunity to do it against Ohio State. Jalen Milroe's at the top of this list right now, I think, because his biggest test has happened.
Yeah,
I don't think that these other guys have had it yet. Carson Beck dropped farther down the list because he's going to have some tough games ahead, but the big game that was going to be a defining moment didn't necessarily go his way until the 4th quarter. So you got to take all that into consideration. So these guys are kind of sitting on that fringe, but they're going to have games to jump in. One guy, though, we haven't mentioned, and we got to, dynamic field and blue running back, Ashton Jeanty, 13 touchdowns on the year. He hardly played in one of the games the 4 games that they've had. He's only took 11 snaps in that one, or 11 carries in that one. Is Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, and Ashton Jeanty, I mean, I think he started off the season against Georgia Southern with 6 touchdowns beyond video game numbers. And so one of the stats that we had talked about that was really impressive was his yards after contact. I think he said it was like 545 yards out of the 845 yards roughly.
Yeah. Over 500 and, on average 7 yards after contact. So once you touch the guy, he's getting 7 more yards on average. So and he's not doing this against right now. The rest of the schedule for someone like Boise State doesn't look super solid, playing from that group of 5 spot. But the teams that he's done this against already, Oregon's in that conversation, and undefeated Washington State is in that conversation. So he's not doing it against,
poor competition.
Yeah.
Definitely not. They got some of the best teams they've played in the West Coast, and them being, the Mountain West, one of the Mountain West representatives, and trying to vie for that group of 5 spot, I think ultimately helps his case to find himself in New York. It's going to be tough to take the award that it's not the Davey O'Brien Award. It's not supposed to be a quarterback award, but it seems to be. It's tough to do that from a running back position. It's tougher to do it from the group of 5 spot. I can't think of a time in years since I've seen that. But these stats right now are on a record pace. He's looked extremely dominant. And, we've talked about it. Like if he could probably play NFL snaps today. So the ability's there. It's just going to be how impressive do they look going down the road, right? If he has a couple 200-yard rushing games and against some of this Mountain West competition, they take down UNLV when they play in a couple weeks, and they're the front runners for that group of 5 spot. I think he definitely would probably earn himself a trip to New York. It might be a little bit tougher to win it, but he'll definitely be there.
Yeah, and it's tough because what could he do against UNLV or Oregon State? How impressive does it have to be to top if someone like Jalen Milroe beats Tennessee and LSU, in a convincing fashion, or for Cam Ward to win the ACC? Is there enough opportunity against what could be considered tougher competition? They're playing Utah State this week, 1-3. I think they're 1-3 right now. So can he do enough against that competition?
Right. And so I guess the last question for you would be, who do you think were the biggest risers and fallers this week when it comes to the Heisman race? I mean, you mentioned Carson Beck, obviously had a 4 turnover performance. It was less about the loss, more about how he played in that loss, despite the efforts to put them in a position to win the game. Who do you think are some of the bigger risers in this race?
Yeah, Milroe was always kind of in the conversation to win the Heisman to start out the year, and I think he was a huge riser in taking the biggest test that he's going to have, or, the biggest game when you're looking at the schedule, and doing what he did, especially in the first half. I think that's the biggest riser. He's a big favorite right now. Travis Hunter, they beat UCF, down on the road.
First dominant win we've seen from Colorado in a while. So
yeah, and it's against a UCF team, that is very good. Or at least we thought, they're going to play Florida this week, so we'll get another, eyeball test on them. But they were running the ball great, not throwing the ball as well as running it. But from what Colorado was able to do in that one, I put him on that list as a riser. Faller, you mentioned Carson Beck is a tough one. He was able to come back in the game and make some great plays, but you can't forget about the start there.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably the biggest fall and rise that I see.
Yeah, and I think from a falling perspective, it might be controversial, but I feel like Quinn Ewers to me is kind of falling just because he's not playing, and seeing what Arch Manning is doing in his place in some ways kind of makes his performance not look as impressive. It looks like you can plug and play a 4 or 5 star guy in there, and they can continue to hit a stride without a beat. And we understand that Quinn Ewers I understand. At least I think he's better, and I know he's more polished, but to me, he's kind of falling right now when it comes to that race, not having an opportunity to get the stats to keep up statistically, but still, top 5 in the SEC when it comes to touchdowns. But also just seeing
back. Yeah.
What's that? Looking forward to seeing him back. It's just, I think that's someone I think about who's fell just because he hasn't played, not because of his abilities.
Yeah. So before we move on to game previews, put you on the spot. If you want to call it right now, we're taking a bet on it, who do you think wins this year?
I truly did tell a couple of my buddies, I felt like that Jalen Milroe had the best shot to win. I had Dylan Gabriel was my second best. I think that both of their games lend to production on the ground, production in the air. But it's hard to go against the number 1 team in the country right now with a quarterback who is top 3 in rushing touchdowns and top 3 in passing touchdowns, or top 3 in passing touchdowns in the SEC.
Yeah. All right. I like that. I would like for that to happen. I think right now my call and where my money would have to go would be on Travis Hunter. Best player in the country. He's doing on both sides of the ball. Any NFL team would benefit from having him at either position. So I know that that's not the measuring stick, but he's doing too well right now for me to say that he doesn't deserve it for the amount of snaps he takes.
Understandable. Like I said, I think he would definitely he deserves to be in discussion. He's doing things that are unique, and we'll see at the end maybe they look at the quarterback stats for Milroe or whoever is there and compare it to past Heisman winners and say, okay, are we giving this to one of the best quarterbacks of all time, or to be a part of this fraternity of Heisman winners, or are we potentially going to omit someone that is doing something we've never seen, playing both ways and doing it at a level that has never been achieved, which is what we're seeing from Travis Hunter right now. And the winning right now as of late, that definitely makes the discussion tougher.